Hello and good evening and welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dram Antique Society tasting. And tonight I'm going to have a look at the rather picturesque distillery of Strathisla. I've got two whiskies from Strathisla, not distillery releases. I have a Strathisla 9-year-old 2013 single cask Master of Malt, bottled at 66.9%, and the Gordon Macphail Strathisla Distillery label 2009, bottled at 46%. Strathisla is in Keith, and I think it'll be back about 2007. I actually stayed in a holiday rental round the corner from the distillery, which is down a sort of side road from the main sort of road that goes through Keith from Elgin to Aberdeen, and down a lane there's the distillery on the left hand side. Just round the corner from that, we stayed in a holiday rental, and I think it was back then Keith, or sorry, in times gone past, Keith was a mill town, and the house we stayed in was probably 200 years old. Big on 3 stories. I think it was probably formerly a mill owner's house. And we checked in. It was a lovely house. The kitchen was very small, I remember. But there was a billiards room. And up on the top floor, the 3rd floor, there was a turret room. So we glanced through the visitors book for this house and noticed there were reports for spectral sightings or spectral noises. And first night of our stay, we both experienced, my wife and I both experienced a coach and horses seemingly being driven through our bedroom. And when we woke up the next day, eventually we were talking, and we both had experienced the same thing. Our children were with us. We had twin boys. They were 15 and our daughter was 13, and we didn't tell them this because, well, so there you are. That was my experience of being close to Strathisla Distillery, which has the distinction of being the oldest continuously operational distillery in Scotland. That's in an industry where starts and stops are rife. And therefore it's pretty impressive to last as long as Strathisla has. It's continuously operated. It's been operational since 1786, which makes it one of the few members of the 1700s Club in Scottish distillation. It was originally founded as Milltown Distillery. George Taylor and Alexandra Milne, who founded the site, wanted to branch out beyond their experiences in the flax dressing industry, so back to the mills. And the land on which the distillery was built was leased from the Earl of Seafield. The first decades of Strathisla production did not go well. The distillery was badly damaged by a fire in 1876. And then in 1879, another tragedy struck, and an explosion in the malt mill destroyed part of the distillery. In 1880, when William Longmore retired and passed operations down to his son-in-law, John Geddes Brown. In 1825, MacDonald, Ingram and Company acquired Strathisla, and 5 years later, in 1830, it changed hands again, with William Longmore acquiring it then. Under Longmore, Strathisla flourished, and in 1870, the name of the site was changed to Strathisla, and then in 1890, it was changed back again to Milton, and then back to Strathisla in 1951. But I'm getting a wee bit ahead of myself here. Operations in the distillery were briefly suspended during the First World War, due to the restriction placed upon the use of barley at the time. Following the First World War, the Great Depression hit the whisky industry hard. Strathisla managed to survive, however, which was no easy feat, as the compounded impacts of both the Depression and Prohibition had crippling effect upon the Scottish whisky industry, or the Scotch whisky industry. The distillery also managed to survive the Second World War, and in 1950 the Chivas brothers bought the site, which was in a sorry state after it went to compulsory auction. Chivas bought the distillery for £71,000, which is a great deal of money at that time, 1950. Following the reconstruction of the site, the distillery's name was changed back to Strathisla again. In 1965, the number of stills at the distillery was increased from 2 to 4 to cater to an increased demand. Under the Chivas brothers, the distillery continued to thrive and, remarkably, has not changed hands. When Pernod Ricard acquired the Chivas Group in 2001, they allowed them to retain control over the distillery. And today the distillery is the operational and spiritual heart of the company. Strathisla draws its water from the Fons Bullen well, which can be visited close to the parking lot. The well is particularly well regarded as it is entirely peat-free, which makes for a wonderfully smooth whisky. Local legend says that kelpies, which are shape-shifting spirits, spectral stuff here again, that can appear as horses and as humans, have been known to pull people down to a watery grave. These kelpies occupy the spring. If there are kelpies there, though, they've done an excellent job of keeping the water clear so that brilliant whisky can be distilled. The production capacity of the distillery stands at 2.4 million litres a year. Strathisla has 2 spirit and 2 wash stills. The wash stills have a capacity of 12,500 litres. The spirit stills have a capacity of 8,500 litres. The pot stills have a short, squat shape with shorter necks that normally appear on pot stills. This gives the spirit maximum exposure to the copper, which helps to contribute to the flavour of the whisky, removing the sulphury compounds. The malt used at Strathisla is predominantly unpeated. It used its own malting floors up until 1950, but since Chivas brothers acquired the distillery, they now source their malt from industrial maltings. It has both dunnage and rack warehouses, and it uses to store its single malt, and it uses a combination of oak and sherry cask in which to age its single malt. So Strathisla whisky, it is one of the most photographed distilleries in Scotland, and for good reason. It's a beautiful distillery nestled in between the Regent's rolling hills and the town of Keith. It's beautiful and compact, and has gardens that the Royal Chelsea Flower Show would envy. It's released several official bottlings, but these have been more of a range of sporadic releases as opposed to a regular range of bottlings that are continuously available from the distillery. Bottlings that have been released from the distillery include a 10-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 18-year-old. There's a 12-year-old single malt and a rectangular shaped bottle, which is available most of the time since 1995. There's been an extensive number of independent bottlings of Strathisla over the years. Most of these have been released by Gordon Macphail. It's released over 40 different bottlings of Strathisla and ranged from a bottling released in the mid-1970s from a cask filled in 1937 to an 8-year-old. And most of these bottlings are expensive vintages ranging from the 50s to the 60s. And as Strathisla is one of the oldest operational distilleries in Scotland, it seems to be almost setting a record on how many independent bottlers have released its whisky. The other bottlers that have released Strathisla include Duncan Taylor, Douglas Lang, and Signatory Vintage, as well as many more. As well as being a prolific single malt, Strathisla is used as a major component in the Chivas Regal blends, and it names itself as the home of the Chivas. The new make spirit from Strathisla is clean on the nose with a damp hay and moss aroma. It's lightly floral, and then you get a little burnt sulphury note. The palate is very pure, sweet, fine-bodied with very gentle fruit in the middle, and the finish has cereal at the end. So let's see how these indie bottlers have handled the Strathisla. So first up we have this Strathisla 9-year-old 2013 single cask from Master of Malt. Small sample here, which I find quite an economical way to try and taste whisky before committing to anything more extravagant like a full bottle. So this was distilled in 2013 and filled into a bourbon barrel for nearly a decade before being presented a huge 66.9% ABV. And it's a release of 223 bottles and still available, and you can still get these samples. So, non-coloured, unchill filtered, of course. And it has quite thin tears. Nothing too clingy there. So I wonder what the mouthfeel will be like. There, it might be quite thin, I suspect. Let's see the nose. You know, my wife today bought a Japanese apple. It was a local company as a fruit and veg selling business just along the road from us. She pops in, she got some veg, but she also noticed they had Japanese apples. So I don't know, I haven't tasted it yet, but this one has an aroma of rosy apples. And that's joined by lemon shortbread, oily orange, and honeyed toast, chocolate covered ginger, and vanilla. You do get the ethanol. This is 66.9%. But you also get some coffee and malt, plus apples, and then lemon verbena, menthol, fennel, and licorice. It's very pleasant. Cut apples, dandelions, and honey, white cherries, marshmallows, wee bits of chalk, and a few drops of lemonade as well. Okay, wish me luck, 66.9. Certainly hits going down. But beyond that alcohol, you get aromatic baking spice with milk chocolate, fizzy cherry and toffee apples, and a hint of crystallized ginger. And then you get melon and peaches with a lovely tangy and clean fruitiness. A bright young malt, very seductive. And yeah, it's sweet cafe latte and custard. And a spoonful of Ovaltine, as well as a handful of jelly babies like Haribo sweeties. And on the finish, caramel and oak char linger. It's a long, clean finish, but citrusy. Pink grapefruits are calling the shots here. I'm going to try, I think, a full mill of water in this. Actually, I added a mill and a half. And you know, almost immediately you do start to get Scotch mist in this. Usually it's a minute in the glass. For years in the cask to get Scotch mist, but nope, it's appearing very rapidly in this one. Lovely stuff. And it's earthier. And you get some carrot and turnip greens and fennel and sorrel. And it's perfect. It's a typical young fruity Speyside, full of orchard fruits, apples again, grains and barley water with a chalky side. It's like some of these young malt whiskies that Douglas Lang and a few others have. And you get perfect green fruits, aniseed, dill and green melons on the nut. This is a really nice whiskey, either naked or with water. It's a rather naked distillate because of the bourbon maturing and the bottling strength as well, and the age. And it's sweet and fruity. It's a very young Speyside. Touches of coffee and ginger. And there's a sort of raw maltiness here. This is like Mother Nature. And the finish is still quite long, with even more caffeinati. I'd even say Nescafe or even chicory. And you know, this is some very pure, very racy young malt whiskey. It's a bit simple, but it's extremely good. And I love the funny feeling of being sipped coffee there. It's the opposite of usual Strathislas that are rather sherried in general. So I'll pause this. So I paused that there to let me cleanse my palate, and now I'm going to taste the second whiskey of this tasting, and it's the Gordon Macphail Strathisla Distillery label 2009, bottle at 46%, and you know, vintage labels and fabulous whiskies combined in the distillery label series from Gordon Macphail. This single malt Scotch whisky was distilled at Strathisla in 2009 and bottled in 2024 after maturation in what I think was a mixture of ex-bourbon and ex-sherry casks. So there's always been independent bottles of Strathisla, and the distillery labels from Gordon Macphail, which is about £90 and up. Unfortunately, on the bottle of this, it doesn't say whether it's coloured or chill filter, as is often stated on the bottlings. It's not clear. listed in the label. And it should be a given that it's Gordon Macphail, but I wish they would make that quite clear on these distillery labels. So what have we got here? So I think it's a mixture of bourbon and sherry. It's about 15 years old, I think. And again, this one has quite a thin tide line. And not a lot of thickness to the tears. And you get ginger and clove spice aromas, which intertwine with baked apple and plenty of Christmas spices, along with orchard fruits, malt and dried fruits, peach, and spices shine through. This one's much spicier than the first one. But there is a nice vanilla note there too. Honey, herbs, strawberry jam. Certainly has a fruity vanilla base. There's also a caramel and a sweet base tone. But there is a woody note to this one. And it's reminiscent of vanilla cream with fruit compote, but from a cigar box. We'll try them out. And you do get cherry, crystalline violets, combining with forest fruits. Yeah, forest fruits, raspberries, blackcurrants, blackberries, apple crumble with dried currants, cranberries and crystallized ginger. Lots more spices in this one, but it's subtle spices. It's nice. There's some dried fruits, orange, floral, sweet, lots of honey. Woody herbs, some tarragon, on a sweet base with some ginger. And it's a medium body finish with herbal influences and garden mint, some pepper and allspice. And the spice sets in and becomes sweet, dry and sweet and floral again. I'm going to try 5 drops of water in this one. And now there's light ginger, and you still get that sweet dark cherry behind it. More spice, a herby spice mixture, and some peach. Try them out. It's a creamy start with a little pepper, and then you get sweet tropical fruits immediately arrive, and then the cherry again, and there's a pleasant freshness to this one, and then the herbs again. Oh, it's a long-lasting finish, beautifully fruity and sweet. You know, this is a nice malty, fruity whiskey with pear and good oak. It seems very ripe and spicy. At times the oak can be a bit soapy. We're a bit bothered by the woodiness. It's like a sweet wood juice, perhaps with a touch of licorice, but it's a bit one-dimensional because in addition to the sweetness and a bit of ginger spiciness, other aromas are lost from the alcohol that give it more complexity. It doesn't quite live up to my expectations of Gordon Macphail bottlings. If you like strong wood aromas, you might see that differently, of course. But you know, if you asked me 15 years ago which malts would become more famous in Aston, for some, I would probably have mentioned Strathisla as one of them. Yeah, that name has rather went in the opposite direction. Uh, who's talking about lovely Strathisla whisky these days? Gordon Macphail are undoubtedly the kings of old Strathisla, which Chivas don't seem to be willing to push the brand or the distillery too much these days. So I expect more Gordon Macphail bottles to be what we see. But Strathisla, I think, is classic Speyside, and it's well worth a try if you can see a bottle somewhere. Probably, I think the ex bourbon younger one was the better one